Hey guys, after a long time, I'm finally ready to put up the review on the Christensen Arms MPR rifle. Now, if you've been watching my channel, you know I've got several videos of this rifle already up. I've got kind of my initial impressions. I've also got a video on kind of the one rifle idea behind building this. And I kind of waited on a full review because I wanted to get a little more time behind the rifle. Now, recently I haven't been able to shoot a lot because of the COVID-19 panic. A lot of the places I'd like to go to actually get out longer range, and a lot of the local matches are canceled. So there's a couple things that I've kind of changed that I haven't really had a chance to hash out yet, but I'm going to go ahead and give you my impressions on this rifle as it is so far. Overall, I really enjoy this rifle. With the carbon fiber construction, it is a lot lighter weight than your typical competition build, which can be a drawback if you want to use it for kind of a traditional PRS style match. But I've had the opportunity to do a couple of field style matches. One was the Vortex Extreme, and the other is a couple matches locally in New Mexico, just a few hours drive away. And those are called the sporting rifle matches, and it's not a long distance, but it's about 1.5 miles, and you basically carry the rifle with you. So this really works well for those style matches where you still have the form function of a typical chassis rifle, but you have a lighter weight. That is a disadvantage when it comes to recoil control. This gun is going to move a little more than your traditional real heavy PRS style match gun, but if you build a good position, if you are steady behind the rifle, then it's going to work well for you. So kind of in my traditional, let's start from the back and work forward. Now to start, you have an adjustable buttstock. So this is something that I like to have, but realistically, once you get it set, you're probably not going to play with an adjustable buttstock very much. So it's adjustable for length of pull. It does have a nice soft recoil pad on it. Not that you really need it for a 6.5 Creedmoor or 308 or something like that, but it is nice just if you're shooting a lot. It's also a real grippy rubber. So if you get it into your shoulder pocket, it really feels comfortable. It is adjustable length of pull, but it's not adjustable for cant or anything like that. So it's just straight in and out. You also have an adjustable cheek riser. Again, nice for getting that scope and getting your alignment behind the scope just right. You have QD slots on either side, so you're able to set it up how you want for a sling. Depending on the match, I don't always carry a sling. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but for hunting use, I really like having a sling on there. And there's also QD points just above the grip. To me, that's a little far forward, but that is another option depending on if you're slinging up for tripod use or something like that. There's also QD points down below. Again, to me, that's probably a little low for your typical use for a sling. I think that your balance would be off a little bit, but that's a great spot if you want to attach a rear bag that you're not going to drop. You could use a QD sling mount and attach that here on the back. Another thing I like on the buttstock is there's actual numbers that are milled in here so that you can kind of get an idea where it's at if maybe you're switching the rifle if you want. You know, my son actually took a deer with this rifle because it was lightweight. It was real easy for him to pack. Not as light as a traditional hunting rifle, but for a chassis style rifle, it's nice and light. So if you were to adjust back and forth, you could keep notes on where those numbers are. Another thing that I do like is it's a folding stock. It folds forward towards the action opening, at least if you're right-handed. So that does trap the bolt. What I like this for is if you are backpacking or hiking a long distance in for hunting, or for the Vortex Extreme, in order to have a shorter package, I just folded the buttstock and then I was able to put it in a backpack, a backpacking style backpack, and actually close the lid over it. So with the real dusty match, it was completely enclosed and I didn't need a specific gun style backpack to do it. I just used a lightweight backpacking one. This has a somewhat of a positive lock. It uses a magnet as well to hold it in place, so this is fairly positive, but when you need to open it up, it comes out pretty easy. Mine personally, there's a small button on the side. It comes pretty tight when you first get it. Once you use it a little bit, it seems to break in, at least mine did. I have heard of some guys complaining about wobble in the way this locks into place. Mine is actually very secure, the stock, when it's fully extended, but some guys have talked about that, so that may be something to watch. Alright, moving forward, let's take a look at the grip. So this is a Magpul Mo style grip. It does use an AR-15 style grip, although you probably can't put one with a beaver tail on there correctly. You can use an AR-15 style grip, or should be able to use some of the AR-15 style MPA grips. Alright, so the trigger guard is a nice large winter trigger guard. I don't really like hunting or using heavy gloves where I can't feel the trigger well, but for a tactical style or mechanic style glove, it's definitely going to be a decent size. Comes with a flat Trigger Tech trigger. This was actually my first experience with a flat trigger. I wasn't really sure what to think. It did take a little bit of adjustment. I know they're getting really popular. It has a small little knob on the bottom, and that flat trigger and the small knob on the bottom, I actually found after using it for a while, I was able to come up with a really consistent placement on the trigger. So I'm actually really enjoying the flat trigger. I don't know that I'm quite ready to switch over other guns, but I would definitely consider it after this point. We'll see after I use it a little more. So from the factory, mine was just about 2 pounds. Now that's a little bit heavier than some people will use for a match gun. I decided to leave it there because I was going to use it for hunting as well. And while a match rifle may be a little bit lighter, I still prefer to have a little bit heavier trigger. Obviously not a real heavy trigger, but more than a pound, closer to that 2 pounds for a hunting rifle, because I want, if it's cold and I'm wearing gloves or my adrenaline's really going, I don't necessarily want a super light trigger. Next up, for the magwell, it takes AI style magazines. As you can see, I've got a 10-round AI inside of it. It ships with 2 5-round Magpuls. In the 6.5 Creedmoor, I found that the Magpuls are plenty long. The overall length is adequate for 6.5 Creedmoor. I have used them for the 260 Remington, and some of my match loads are a little too long to fit in the Magpul magazine. Like I said, it comes with the 5 rounds. I've also used the 10 rounds for Magpul. The nice thing about the Magpul magazines is they are very easy to load, which so are the AIs, but they're about $40 to $45 a piece, whereas the AI mags and some of the other options are about $80. I haven't really tried Accurate Mag or some of those other options that are out there now, but the Magpuls and the AIs have worked just fine for me. So one feature on the magazine well that I'll have to show you on this other side is it has a cutout so that if you want to feed the magazine in at an angle, you can get it in and seated. If you're not able to actually, if you don't have the space underneath, like you're prone on the ground and you need to get a loaded magazine in. That's not something that I've really needed a whole lot, but it's, you know, if they're going to mill the chassis that way, I don't think it's a negative. I haven't noticed anything. There's a little bit of movement in the magazine, and I've not noticed that to actually have any performance effects. I've not noticed issues feeding from the Magpul or the AI magazines, so they seem to work just fine. Also on the left side, for a right-handed shooter, you have a side bolt release, which is kind of a nice feature. Comes with it that way, which for a rifle this much, you would expect some of those extra features. The bolt comes with a fluted bolt handle. The bolt knob itself is fluted, and you can remove that. Christensen Arms sells a couple different options, and I'd have to look up the actual threading pattern, but there's other manufacturers that could thread a bolt knob for you as well. Safety is a typical Remington style safety. So your extractor is a leaf style extractor, sometimes referred to as kind of as an M16 style extractor, although it's not an actual M16 extractor. That is one of the weak points of the MPR, in my opinion. So I have had, I'll see if I can find video of it. I don't know if I've captured it from any of the competitions I've done, but I have had issues with extraction. So far, that's really my only true complaint about this rifle is at $2,200 to $2,500, depending on where you find it. I shouldn't be having extraction issues. What's happened at the range and during competitions is I've had both failures to extract and failures to eject, which I think are due to the round not extracting properly and coming off of the extractor as the round comes out and before the ejector can push it out. So I've had failures to eject on the clock where I've had a round basically come loose and it's sitting there on top of the magazine and I have to do a finger sweep to get it out. I have had a couple failures to extract where the round was still in the chamber and a rod was necessary to knock it out. Now, it wasn't in there tight. Just a very light tap with the rod knocked it right out. But the bolt itself and the extractor would not go back over that rim and pull it out. So that has been frustrating. Fortunately, none of those have been on the clock. I've had a couple of them that were literally the last round of a string of fire, and I was able to, fortunately the clock was stopped, I was able to knock it. So that's extremely frustrating on the clock. Now, I reached out to Christensen Arms and they offered to send me a slightly more powerful extractor. So with that installed, hopefully the problem's gone. Unfortunately, I have not been able to make it out to the range since they sent me that. So unfortunately, at the point of this review, I was hoping to have that done. But I'm going to have to maybe do an update video once I get a couple hundred more rounds through the gun with the new extractor to make sure I don't have any problems. So that is really my biggest complaint, and I think unacceptable for a rifle of this price to have issues with extraction like that. Granted, Christensen Arms was very responsive when I reached out to them. They have good customer service from a lot of what I've read. When I reached out to them, they offered to send me one right away. So that's not really an issue. They also offered to have me send the gun in if I was not comfortable installing an extractor, but I'm comfortable doing that myself, and I didn't want to wait and see how long that would take. I wanted to have the rifle here because it still worked about 95% of the time. And of course, with about 60 rounds, I would have about 2 rounds that dropped off the extractor on top of the magazine, and then I may have 1 stick in the chamber. Definitely too often to be able to be really comfortable with this on a high stakes match. These were local matches. There's nothing really riding on it, so it wasn't a big deal. Moving on, I don't know the dimensions or anything, but it is a matched chamber. Just anecdotally, it's a much tighter chamber than the Ruger Precision rifle that I have, which I would kind of expect. I don't know the actual dimensions to it. I haven't measured it. It does include a 20 MOA Picatinny rail, so you have some cant built into that for long-range shooting. Moving on, you have Christensen Arms. This is a proprietary, the whole chassis is proprietary. At the time I bought this, you could only get it with the MPR. They do now sell the chassis as a standalone if you want to build your own lightweight rifle with their chassis. Overall, I've been pleased with it. The forearm is a carbon fiber, just like a lot of the rest of the gun, and lightweight. It does have M-lock slots on the sides and on the bottom. It has holes on the top, but those don't appear to be any specific hole pattern. I think they're just there to relieve some heat. Overall, I like it. There's a couple screws to be able to remove it to expose the barrel. It does ship with a Picatinny rail for the front that has that does have a place that you can mount a more traditional sling stud if you want. You can see here I added on a QD mount. That's one thing that I wish that they had on the front already, but it probably wouldn't be secure enough if you made a QD mount out of the carbon fiber. But in order to balance the rifle on a sling, I've got the QD mount up front and then use one in the back. The barrel. So I've heard mixed reviews on the accuracy of the Christensen Arms barrels. Some people talk about them walking as they warm up, but then a lot of people don't have any issues. Fortunately, I've been happy with the barrel. It's at least as accurate as I am, at least as long as I'm not getting rushed or moving through too quickly a group. I don't really have specific numbers on groups. I'll try to put up a couple pictures, kind of give you an idea of some of the loads I worked up. But it is a carbon fiber barrel. Now, depending on the caliber and the options you get, you can get it anywhere from, I believe, a 16-inch 223 up to about a 24-inch barrel. So depending on which version of the MPR, you come with a couple different lengths. I got the shortest barrel length I could for the 6.5 Creedmoor because I knew I would be suppressing it. So I wanted to keep the barrel a little shorter so that the overall package would be a little shorter. I wouldn't worry about that as much for competition, but because this is going to be largely a hunting gun as well, I wanted to keep the overall weight down and keep it closer to a hunting weight, even though it's still a little heavier than some of your traditional hunting rifles. Now, right now you can see I've got the Silencer Co. Omega 300 on here, and that's on a brake mount with their muzzle brake, Silencer Co.'s muzzle brake. This comes originally with a Christensen Arms side baffle brake. It's got ports on the top that you can open up to adjust the way that it recoils. I'll show some video of that if I have it before I switched over. I think I do. But that brake was actually really effective. I was impressed how little recoil this had for a lightweight 6.5 Creedmoor, which is not going to recoil a whole lot, but it really kept the rifle very smooth. I do think putting the suppressor on it, I gave up a little bit of that recoil control, but overall it's much more pleasant to shoot with the suppressor on it. Right now you can see I've got just a very basic mount for a tripod. This is an old video tripod. It's not the most steady, as you've probably seen this kind of shake a little bit. I'm looking at some options for potentially switching to an ARCA style rail. I just recently did that with my AI chassis on my 260 competition rifle, and I'd like to keep things kind of the same. So that's one of the reasons why the bipod's not on here. I converted that bipod to an ARCA style clamp. And then you'll see on here I put a Vortex PST Gen 2 3 to 15 power scope. This is, I think, a really good fit for this rifle. It's not too heavy, but it has a lot of features and it's very clear for the price. I'd looked at the Razor series for Vortex, some of the Night Force and some of those, and just the price, the weight, and the performance, this kind of seemed to fit the bill. The Razors are great scopes, but they're just too heavy for how I wanted to spec this rifle out. Something like the Razor HD AMG might have worked. That's probably a pretty similar weight, but that was a little more than I wanted to spend on this build. And I also wanted that lower end 3 power for hunting, because I spent a lot of time hunting along or in pine and aspen forests, so there's times where I don't need much magnification. So overall, for the price and the weight and the style of this rifle, I do think it's a pretty good value. You know, it's not the cheapest rifle, it's certainly not the most expensive, it's not like a high-end custom. Christensen Arms doesn't sponsor me or anything like that. In fact, I reached out to them several times to try to review a couple of their rifles, and they don't even write me back. So this is a rifle I walked into a Sportsman's when they were, you know, a little bit off, and I just bought myself and bought the scope. You know, this is, you know, none of this was supplied, none of this is, you know, I'm not compensated for any of it. I paid for everything on here, and this is still one of my favorite rifles to shoot. I will continue to use it for hunting particularly. I will probably compete with it. Some of the more PRS style matches, I think I will stick to my 260. That's a little bit heavier style gun. But the field style matches where you're hiking and shooting, I will continue to use this, and I really look forward to getting this to the point where I actually shoot the barrel out and I get really comfortable with it. Overall, for the value, for the money, I think this is a good rifle, especially if you want to get into the, if you like the chassis style rifle, but you don't want the weight of some of the chassis style rifles, this is a good fit. One question I see mentioned a lot is a question of should you get the MPR or Christensen Arms Ridgeline. Now, I haven't looked here recently at prices, but the MPR you can find usually somewhere like $2,200 to $2,400 for the short action, the 6.5 Creedmoor, the 308, and then the Ridgeline is probably closer to $1,800 or $1,900. So from what I understand, the action and the barrel is the exact same between those two rifles. So the real difference is, do you want a chassis or do you want a traditional hunting style stock? Now, I have heard of some guys buying the MPR to swap out the chassis for something a little heavier like an MPA or MDT chassis or something like that, and I think that's kind of a waste unless you're going to be able to recoup a good chunk of that money from the chassis. If you're thinking of a Christensen Arms rifle and you want to drop it into a different chassis, I would suggest the Ridgeline. They actually make a titanium action version of the Ridgeline, and you're basically getting the same action and barrel for several $100s less. So if you're going to just swap out that stock anyway, you might as well get the Ridgeline instead of the MPR. Now, they make a couple other rifles that I'd love to try out, like the BA They have a tactical style that are more of a traditional stock, but a tactical style stock that might be appropriate for shooting in a competition. So I'd love to try a couple of those out, especially maybe something a little bigger. Like this one I would have considered in a 6.5 PRC if it was available at the time. Now this comes in a variety of calibers, not everything that Christensen Arms offers, but you can get it from 223 all the way up to a 338 Lapua in the MPR style. It's just going to use a little bit different form factor, size factor, and use different magazines. Alright guys, so that is the Christensen Arms Modern Precision Rifle. That's my review of it. I like the rifle. It's a good rifle with occasional problems with extraction or things like that. But overall good rifle. Christensen Arms will take care of you if you need it. And I will do an update video once I have some time to actually run it with the new extractor and make sure everything's working with that. So if you like this video, please like, subscribe. Let me know in the comments below what else you want to see. If you have questions on this, I'll try to answer them. Maybe even do a video if that would help out. So let me know what you guys thought, and thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next video.